Hey yo, this is Sean Party Girls. I'm over Ride Life and living Scotcha. Yeah man, real reggae and soca music is on Carib Star Radio. Yeah man, may I tell you, say yo, feel the Caribbean groove right here on the iHeart Radio. iRid Jam!
A science story, huh?
These NYU scientists,
I felt
right.
I was so
And I just thought, well,
I figured it out.
it was that golden moment.
Because science was on my side.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Story Clatter, where true personal stories about science help us to discover just how weird and wonderful it is to exist in this world and be a human. I'm your host, Misha Gajewski, and today, let's talk about sex, baby. Except not as awkward as the time your parents sat you down to teach you about the birds and the bees. Unless they never had that conversation with you, in which case, this episode is going to be eye-opening in more ways than one. Either way, I can't wait to share these stories with you because they're so fun. Our first storyteller is Edith Gonzalez. Edith is an assistant professor of archaeology and critical museum studies at the University at Buffalo SUNY. She's a Fulbright Scholar and a 2-time champion of the Smut Slam sex storytelling show. Her story was recorded at our go-to spot in Toronto, Burdock Brewery, and is deeply relatable to anyone who's ever tried to put the spice back in their relationship or tried to take off skinny jeans in a sexy way. I can't wait for you to hear this amazing story. I love it so much, and I know you will too. Here's Edith.
In the year 2000, I had 2 life-changing events. The first one is I married the absolute love of my life, Christopher. And the second is that Google just exploded, and all of a sudden I could just find out how to do anything in the universe. And so Christopher and I got married, and during that first couple of years of marriage, you go through what's called the honeymoon phase. And because I do understand how human evolution works, there is something called serial pair bonding. And it means that in human evolution, couples would get together for about 4 years and have children. But at about year 4, about year 5, they start to lose interest in one another and will then procreate with another partner. So I'm in 2004. And I have not only gotten married, I've started teaching, I've had a baby, and bought a house in the suburbs. And so I realized that Google was my friend. Google helped me do things I never thought in a million years I could do. I'm afraid of electricity, like the microphone is terrifying me right now. And I learned how to change a light switch in this 1920s house. Thank you. But here I am in year 4 with this little baby and feeling really overwhelmed and kind of like I'm spending all of my time being a mom and trying to be starting a new job and doing all of these things that I felt myself sort of slipping away. And I felt becoming more distant from my husband, who I thought was the sexiest, most handsome man I had ever seen. He had a profile like a Roman coin, like I could be so angry at him and still want to jump his bones every night that when now he'd look at me and be like, "You wanna?" I would be like, "You wanna what?" Like, I have no. And I realized this was a problem. So I decided Google would be my friend. And I Googled how to bring a little more spice back into your marriage for Valentine's Day, which led me to a YouTube video of how to give your husband a lap dance. And I thought, this is a great idea. We have spent months restoring the ground floor of our house And here he is. He's a writer. He's upstairs working in sort of this dingy environment on a little cheap IKEA office chair, typing away at the desktop computer. The floors are unfinished. They're sort of still kind of like plywood and splintery old flooring. And I think I will just surprise him when he's up there. So in the morning, I kind of bring up a little boombox and some CDs. It's still the aughts, we use CDs. So it's up there, and I can fit into my skinny jeans again. Again, the aughts. The skinniest jeans you can imagine, with lots of Lycra in them. I wore a good rock and roll t-shirt, and I'm thinking, this is it. I am going to remind him of the woman he married. I'm going to remind him of the girl he knew in 1989, dancing in a cage suspended over the dance floor at a nightclub in a former church. That's the girl he married. So here I go. So I'm kind of up there, and I wait, and he's sitting there, and he's typing away, and kind of like, yeah, he's like, basically, why are you in my space? And I had put the baby down for a nap, and I hit the button on the boombox, and what begins to play is Prince singing, "You sexy motherfucker." And he kind of turns around slowly. Now, also in my deep dive into Google, I questioned the load-bearing capacity of a cheap plastic IKEA office chair. And I discovered that it would support the weight of 2 people, and it also had these beautifully engineered locking wheels, so that should 2 people sit down on it with a significant weight, the wheels would lock in place. So I thought I had this all figured out. I know you're seeing my fatal mistake, which is the music starts going, and I'm like, trying to be all seductive, dancing. And have you ever tried to take off a pair of very, very skinny jeans rhythmically in a sexy way? There is no way. So I'm kind of taking the jeans down, and it's like, oh, you sexy motherfucker. Sexy motherfucker, shaking that ass, shaking that ass, shaking that ass. Sexy motherfucker. And I managed to get 1 foot out of the jeans. And he is over. Now, we have not made an attempt to have a romantic sort of experience in a while, so he's just sort of overcome by the generosity of this gift. And he says, basically grabs me and pulls me onto the chair, where we begin to have a wild and lustful experience on the IKEA office chair. And I don't know if I mentioned, he's a big man. He's like 6'3" and tall, like well-formed and fit, strong. And so I'm sort of straddling him, for lack of a better term, on this office chair. He's pushing off on the floor and manages to overwhelm the locking wheels. So the chair moves and gets wrapped into the Lycra jeans that are still attached to my left foot. So as we begin to have our fabulous experience, and it was fabulous, with one spectacular motion, the Lycra acts as a slingshot and yanks the chair out from under him. And he reaches up and grabs the desk and manages to kind of stop some of the impact. But we crashed to the floor with me on top of him. My knees hit the splintery, like plywood. It's a huge crash. The baby wakes up crying. And he says to me, "We're not going anywhere." And we just roll over and finish in this like fireworks of love and lust. Yeah. So, we're there kind of catching our breath. And I sort of managed to get my foot out of the jeans. I think I have a sprained ankle at this point. And I sort of limp downstairs and get my robe on and get the baby and get him all resettled and sort of back to bed. And I come out and my husband is still upstairs. And I'm like, okay. I walk upstairs and he's still sitting on the floor next to the desk. And he's holding his shoulder in a way that makes me think, okay. And I quickly Google torn rotator cuff and where is the nearest emergency room? And he just looks at me and says, it was worth it.
That was Edith. And I have to say, I can never look at an IKEA office chair the same way. To learn more about Edith or to listen to her other stories on our podcast, visit our website, storyclatter.org. Being a storyteller on our stage is just one way to make Storyclatter happen, but if standing alone in the spotlight in front of an audience doesn't speak to you, maybe becoming a Storyclatter donor might be more your speed. Storyclatter donors play a vital role in our ability to bring you this podcast. We're in this together. Storyclatter is one big experiment that's designed to connect us around our love of discovery, curiosity, and the natural world. If you believe in the power these stories have and this mission, please donate to the Storyclatter at storyclatter.org/donate. The most popular level is $10 a month, and you can make your tax-deductible donation at storyclatter.org/donate. But really, any level makes a difference, and we're so grateful to everyone who supports Storyclatter. Our next story is from Lee Osorio. Lee is an actor and playwright based in Atlanta, Georgia, and you might recognize him from NBC's Found. His story was recorded in Atlanta at one of our favorite spots, Atlanta Underground. His story is wild in so many ways. Also, while we joke about how there's no learning at Storyclatter, I genuinely learned some really interesting things about the sex lives of zoo animals, which is definitely not a sentence I thought I'd ever say out loud. But I can't wait for you to also learn some fun facts about animal sex. Here's Lee.
I am at work. Specifically, I am standing in front of the orangutan enclosure at the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle, Washington. It is summer, but it feels like fall. Because it always feels like fall in Seattle. Always. And I am at work, but I am not working at the zoo in any way that you are probably imagining. I am not a zookeeper. I am not a veterinarian. I am not selling hot dogs or popcorn or stuffed lions and tigers and bears. I am teaching summer theater camp. Yes, at the zoo, to first and second graders. We do these creative drama activities solving animal-related mysteries, and it is very, very, very cute. Usually. Today, I am standing with about a dozen 6 or 7-year-olds in front of the orangutan enclosure, watching a male orangutan go down on a female orangutan as if someone has shoved a very dry muffin inside of her. And he cannot stop licking until he gets every last crumb. What are they doing? One of the campers asks me, and I say, he's grooming her. He just really wants to make sure there are no insects down there. I don't think she's buying it. Full disclosure, I never anticipated working in a zoo, but as any actor will tell you, the number of theater-adjacent jobs that you end up taking are incredible, especially when you are new in town. And I am new in Seattle. In fact, I have just moved there with my relatively recent boyfriend. For the purposes of this story, why don't we call the boyfriend Walker, okay? Walker and I actually met here in Atlanta. I was working at the Caribou Coffee on the corner of 10th and Piedmont, And yes, thank you. He was working at the Trader Joe's down the street on Monroe. And so we would see each other at work, we would flirt a little bit, we started hanging out, and our relationship developed in the way that only a 25-year-old gay boy's first real relationship can, incredibly quickly, right? Like 1 minute we're making out on the dance floor and we're tripping on shrooms in the park, and the next minute he's saying, I think I want to move. I think I want to leave Atlanta. I think I want to leave the South. I want something new. Do you want to come with me? And we have so much in common. I mean, we both like making out on the dance floor. We both like tripping on shrooms in the park. This must be true love. Of course I say yes. And so Walker convinces me to move as far as the continental United States will allow us. We move to Seattle, Washington. There are a couple of red flags that I probably should have paid more attention to. For instance, the night that we're supposed to pack up the car and get everything ready to start the drive across country, Walker is laid out on the floor with bad gas. He cannot move. I'm 25 at this point. I have never had paralyzingly painful gas. I'm 39 now, I still haven't. But that is the situation we're dealing with. And so I pack the entire car by myself. And I clean Walker's entire apartment by myself. Just like I booked all of the hotels and found our studio apartment all by myself. So I'm in Seattle and I'm working at the zoo. And the longer that I'm working at the zoo, the more I start to envy the animals there. Because my life has started to feel like a snow globe that someone shook really fucking hard and then threw out the window of a semi-truck barreling down the highway. I've just moved thousands of miles away from all of my friends and family. And in case you have not spent a lot of time in Seattle, the Seattle freeze is real. People are not unfriendly, but they're distant. It's really hard to make friends. And in case you didn't know, being a summer camp counselor at the zoo does not pay very well. So even with Walker's 10% discount at Trader Joe's, it has become really tight financially. And to top it all off, I find out one of the reasons that we got the studio apartment so affordably is because they're building a light rail station right next door, underground. And so the entire apartment shakes from 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. These animals, they don't have to worry about construction noises. They don't have to worry about making rent every month. They get nutritious and delicious meals delivered to them right at their door 3 times a day. And as I watch Mr. and Mrs. Orangutan, they are having a lot more sex than I am. Because it turns out that Walker is suffering from some pretty severe depression. And his primary coping mechanism is some pretty severe alcoholism. So every day he comes home from work, he will have 2 to 3 simpler times. If you don't know what those are Trader Joe's brand of lager. If by lager you mean fermented urine. And then he'll start in on the wine. There's always, I notice, a half bottle of wine around our apartment because he'll finish off 1 bottle and then just have a couple of glasses from the second. So it's not like he's having a whole bottle every day by himself, which of course he is. And then after that, sometimes we'll go out for drinks. So to say that our sex is infrequent would be a bit of both an over and an understatement. And so it is with no small amount of envy that I am watching Mrs. Orangutan. And it is right about then that my co-counselor comes up to me and he says, "Hey, you know those orangutans are mother and son, right?" And that was my reaction. Oh, ew, what the fuck? And then the second thought that I had was, well, he is certainly earning the name of Oedipus. Okay. he goes on to explain something that I never really thought about before, which is animals have sex, okay, duh. And when animals have sex, they have babies, also duh, that's science. But at any given zoo, there's a relatively small gene pool. So oftentimes, animals that are related to each other will be put in the same enclosures, and that means they end up having sex. And so to prevent a bunch of like inbred, two-headed, many-nippled animals running around, well, I don't know, like lots of animals have lots of nipples, so like what would many nipples, even like 80 nipples? Anyway, to prevent the inbred animals with all the nipples running around, the animals are on birth control. Which, like, of course they are. Of course they would be, but it never occurred to me before. And it is him saying this that starts me wondering, along with the lack of sex life in my personal life, it kind of gets me obsessed with the sex lives of zoo animals. And I learned that for every species at every zoo, basically around the world, there's a huge genealogical chart, like a huge family tree for every species to make sure that when you want to breed one animal with another animal, that they're not too closely related. For instance, at the Seattle Zoo in 2001, they had an elephant calf born, and it was this huge deal. There are very few elephant calves that are born in captivity. Her name was Hansa, and people came to see her, and the community loved her. And then in 2007, when she was 6, she got sick, and they gave her fluids and they gave her antibiotics, but she didn't get better. And one morning, the keeper came into her barn and they found her dead. It was very sad. The community was very upset. But by the time that I got there, 3 years later in 2010, there were talks about how maybe it's time to try again with Hansa's mother. Maybe it's time to impregnate her again. So what do? They go to this giant genealogical chart, and they find an elephant bull at one of the zoos across the world that isn't too closely related to the female elephant that they have. And they find this male elephant, I think in Cincinnati, okay? So you have a male elephant in Cincinnati, and you've got the female elephant in Seattle, and like, what do they do now? Because that is a very long distance to go for a booty call, for like a one-night stand, and like massive bull. So what do? I learned that they FedEx the semen. They FedEx the semen overnight from Cincinnati to Seattle, and then they inject it into the female. And this brings up so many questions. Like, who is masturbating this elephant? Right? And like, do you buy him dinner first? Does he buy you dinner? And like, two hands, right? We're talking like this is a two-hand job. Anyway, and then like, okay, so if like for a male human, you use like a tiny little cup, do you use like a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket or like a bathtub? And is there like elephant porn that you put on while you're doing this? And so the more that I learn about zoo animal sex, the less certain I am that I want to be one. Free rent and free food sounds great, but if it comes at the cost of having to go down on your mother and get jerked off by a rando keeper, I'm not so certain it's worth it. And then one morning, after a long night of fighting with Walker, I sleep through my alarm, I miss the bus, I have to get to work. The only way to get there on time is for me to ride my bike. So I start pedaling as fast as I can. It has just rained a little bit. It hasn't rained for a while. The roads are super, super slick. So when I take a turn a little too fast, my bike, it slips out from under me, and my chin hits the pavement. And my bottom teeth hit my top teeth, and they break my two front teeth. One vertically, one horizontally. It doesn't hurt, miraculously. I don't even realize that I've broken my two front teeth until I feel them with my tongue. This teaches me two things. One, if you are going to knock out your two front teeth, do it while you are teaching 6- and 7-year-olds. Because they will love it. They will come up to you very excited and say things like, Mr. Lee, we're missing the same tooth. Two, I don't live in a zoo. I live in the wide and wild world where any second you can have your two front teeth knocked out And even when you think you have had as much change as one body can possibly handle, the world is always right there waiting to tell you there's more. And so you can cling to what is known, even when what is known is making you miserable, or you can embrace change. Change is going to come either way. And so I make the decision to embrace change. I break up with Walker. It's actually a bit of a wake-up call to him, and he gets sober eventually. And me, I get new teeth. And I eventually stop working at the zoo. I eventually leave Seattle and make my way back home to Atlanta. And I am still single, but I am enjoying the wide and varied gene pool that this wild world has to offer. Thank you.
That was Lee. If you'd like to learn more about him, visit our website, storyclatter.org. Our website is just one way to connect with Storyclatter, but there are so many other ways, and we hope you'll use them all. You can always follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Head to storyclatter.org to become a financial supporter, or if you want to come to one of our shows, start your own Storyclatter show in your community, or even learn how to tell your own science story, you can learn all about that on our website too. This podcast is produced by me, Nisha Gajewski, along with Nikisha Roberts-Washington, Jen Chen, and Aaron Barker, Executive Director and co-founder of The Storyclatter. The stories featured in today's episode were produced by Sarah Mazrui, Mesa Saleta, Kelly Vinyl, and me. Special thanks goes out to the Storyclatter's board and staff, including Anne-Marie Lonsdale, Leslie Burnson, and Lindsay Cooper. Our theme music is by Ghost. And next week, as is the natural progression from sex to babies, I'll be back with stories about being a mom. Also, it's Mother's Day next weekend, so if you haven't gotten your mom a gift yet, this is your reminder. Anyways, until next time, thanks so much for listening.
At LASIK Plus, we know LASIK is a big decision, and every one of our patients is unique. That's why we customize your LASIK journey to you.
I only have a certain budget.
No problem. Right now at LASIK Plus, get $1,000 off LASIK when treated in May. That's $500 off per eye, plus guaranteed financing options. So visit mylasicoffer.com today to start your journey towards 20/20 vision. Must mention this promotion and be treated in May of 2024 to qualify. $1,000 off standard price of wave light procedure. $500 off for one eye. Cannot be combined with any other offers. Go to mylasicoffer.com for details.